All right, so this is a emergency meeting of the Valley of the Sun Waldorf Education Association Board of Directors. We are meeting on an emergency basis tonight because COVID continues to throw curveballs at us, and some things shifted since our last meeting just 8 days ago. So in an effort to be as mindful of the many competing interests here, we're having this meeting to continue the discussion. So let's introduce ourselves and then jump into it. And for those watching, this is a meeting of the board. It's our meeting, so you can watch, but you cannot participate. That's the nature of board meetings, consistent with the open meeting laws in Arizona. All right, so I'm Gregory Schneider. I'm the board president and a father of 2 children at the school right now. April, you want to go next?
Maybe. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Did that work? Okay. April Sauer, board secretary and parent at the school.
Mr. Tanner?
John Tanner, board member. I've had 5 children at Desert Marigold.
And Nathaniel?
Nathaniel Allen, board member, and I'm a parent.
All right, so just to recap how we got here. The state and the county had guidance as of November 4th, our last meeting, that said there are 3 benchmarks you need to look at: cases per 100,000, % positivity, and hospital visits for COVID-like illnesses in the region. And they said at that time, if any one of those factors is in a substantial transmission category, then you should consider, then you should transition to virtual learning as soon as you can, essentially. And they changed that guidance shortly after our meeting and said, okay, it's not just one factor now, it's all 3 that we want to see in substantial transmission before we're going to say that you should go to virtual learning only as a matter of public health. Before that, they recommend that we consult with the county health department to see if we should consider going to virtual only learning. Additionally, new information continues to come out in the press about studies on schools specifically and the coronavirus and its transmission rates. And related to that, the sort of the side effects of school closures and some of the problems that kids and families are facing with prolonged school closures. The flip side of that is, at the same time, nationwide, coronavirus cases are surging at an unbelievable level, and including pretty rapidly here in Maricopa County, Arizona. And there are a number of public health experts that say when you're at these levels, it's time to shut things down considerably. Some even say including schools in addition to bars and restaurants and gyms, among other places. So this is an area that's subject to pretty intense debate, I would say. At our last board meeting, over some objection, reasonable objection, and well-intentioned objection, I think, we agreed to align with the then county's guidance on when virtual learning should commence. Well, the guidance has now changed, so I think it's worth having another discussion about that in light of everything that's going on. So, board members, at this point, I'm just going to open it up your thoughts. I said to each of you in setting this emergency meeting that we're going to try and keep our discussion to an hour because this is time sensitive. But that said, I think we can have a full and healthy discussion in that time. So with that, I open the floor.
Well, I thought I'd be taking notes, but I guess not. I have a lot of thoughts about this, and they don't deviate too much from where I stood at our last meeting. I'm happy with the decision that we made. I prefer the previous decision of the state guidance and the benchmarks that they set for us, and I'm happy to stick with that. I did watch Dr. Kara Christ gave an update today and talked about the increase in our state. And I was looking closely at Maricopa, but in Kara Christ's update, she was saying that, you know, talking about who is affected the most. And it was certainly the, college age students. I don't remember the breakdown in the age, which would made up for like 50% of the cases. And then when you looked at those who were younger than 20, it was much smaller amount, but it was still 2,732. And that data was as of November the 1st. And all of those numbers are increasing right now. So I just would prefer to stay on the side of caution. And I'm also watching schools around the valley in Maricopa and in our backyard, Roosevelt School District. There are a lot of schools and districts that are already closing, and they have all the same information that we do. And there are some who have yet to even open to hybrid. And again, they have the same information that we do. So I tend to fall on the side of being cautious. And I just really want to protect our students and our staff. And that's where I stand as of now.
Nathaniel, you want to weigh in?
I was the only no vote in the board meeting last time, and I feel like there was a scenario painted in which I was questioned as to whether or not I thought we should adhere to the guidance. And I think it's interesting at this stage, now that the guidance has changed, if that same question could be reflected back on the three of you as to whether or not you plan to adhere to the guidance. And I think the guidance now says if all three, then for the same logic, it's a divider remain open. So we shouldn't not close if the health, if the public health said to close, because they hadn't yet said that. So I didn't think we needed to make that decision. I also thought that we should incorporate a wider stakeholder input, because the decision to reclose, it's pretty easy for the four of us in a room to come up with, what we think is best. But the very people it impacts most are those that have to deal with it on an operational level. Parents who don't want their kids to come, they still have that option to not come. But again, it's another scenario where by us closing, we force those who want to be there in person to not be there in person. And so to me, it's the only decision that has a consequence that we are directly engaging in causing. It's to be open does not equal COVID. COVID does not equal certain things. It's we mitigate, we do everything we can. And then based on, the data as it presents itself day to day to us and our community directly, I think that's how we make decisions. So I haven't changed at all about my opinion. I would still say if public health gave us a very specific, just like the governor's office did when they said to close last spring, obviously that's not a decision we need to make. We obviously do it. But in these cases, I don't think we have the luxury of picking or choosing necessarily once we've made the commitment to follow the guidance. So I just think it's interesting that we're in a situation a week later where we have to kind of reflect that same scenario. Are we going to follow the guidance? And the guidance now says not until all 3. So, and I would, if you pushed me in a corner, I don't know that I would be able to say unequivocally, yes, we always follow the guidance. In this case, I think the guidance is in line with what I think is right for the student body, because I think being in person is critical for their education. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Mr. Tanner?
So during the last meeting, I wanted to remain in integrity with the original agreement, and I still do. However, given this new information and having talked to a lot of the faculty and staff, I would choose to keep the school open at this time. However, I agree with April. I very serious about the health and safety of all individuals, and I would want to watch it and be ready to take swift action should we get close to that threshold. Shutting down the school is a big deal, and it puts it's very complicated in many ways, and so I think that the children's education is important. I think the children's mental health is important. This is a very stressful time. And I've seen profound changes in the children who came to me when the school reopened to this time now. And they laugh, they play, and given the level of seriousness that they're exposed to, I could practically cry to watch them sit there, or to be outside and play soccer and laugh and be with their friends, and come inside and be happy to learn in the classrooms. It's not just about the 6th grade. It's about the total experience. And I'm very proud of the community, the parents who have chosen to stay home. The decision, I completely respect the decisions that parents have made. I support them in their decisions. I appreciate that. And when their children are sick, what I have seen is that they keep their kids home, and I want to publicly express my gratitude for the responsibility that I have seen from the parents. And I've seen the children. They're wearing their masks. They're washing their hands. They're following the guidelines. I think we're a model school for following the guidelines.
All right. So, I mean, it's good to hear operationally on the ground that that that's happening, because I think that's an important factor, because the extent that you can mitigate the risk depends on adhering to safety precautions on campus to a large extent. Now, the other side of this, or many sides of this, is everybody's trying to make plans of one kind or another. The teachers are, the students are, they're anticipating what's going to happen. The parents are, who have plans. Teresa, our interim executive director, couldn't make it this evening, but I was in touch with her. Whereas last time around, we had a handful of students who were getting on-site support services. Based on where things stand now, it would be close to 30 students who would need on-site support services. So it's a huge increase in the number of people who, are going to need that in any event. That's more than 10% of the school population right there. And as much as I don't like changing course midstream, I like having a clear plan and following it and being consistent with it, and so everybody knows what's going to happen. When the state and the county are changing their guidance, and there's new, albeit conflicting, scientific data that seems promising in the direction of keeping schools open. And we previously committed, essentially, to adhering pretty closely to the county guidance. Like you say, Nathaniel, it feels odd to then deviate significantly from that when many school districts are continuing to remain open because they have not had significant evidence of transmission of COVID on their campuses. Now, that said, like April said, there are many school districts that have not reopened. There are many school districts that are choosing to close in-person learning right now and have done so over the last few days. So it's not as though there is a clear, correct answer here. And like you, April, I very much prefer to err on the side of caution, especially when it comes to people's health and safety. But I'm not a public health expert. And the people who are saying there's a little more breathing room here, for lack of a better word, than we first thought. We can give these factors a little more time to grow and then see how things change over time. So it's, I said back in, I think March and then again in August that we are in a pretty impossible position as non-experts on this board trying to make public health decisions that affect hundreds of children and families. Doing the best we can. I don't know that there is truly a correct answer here. And whichever way we go, I think people are going to disagree. And they are reasonable people who have very legitimate concerns. So that said, I think if anybody else wants to weigh in, please, we still have, some time here. But if not, then I think we should make a couple motions and see where people land on adjusting course a little bit here.
Gregory, I think if you'll propose some scenario motions and we just see where they go, that's probably the best. I don't have anything else to add other than to vote.
Okay. April, anything else? Mr. Tanner?
No, I think that's fine. I'd like to see a scenario where we're watching this extremely closely and ready to take action should we need to take action. I don't want to be put in a corner where we can't do what we need to do, and quickly.
Yeah, and I guess I should add some of the background here. In anticipating following our current plan, the faculty and staff have done, I would say, a heroic effort of updating our mitigation plan and coming up with schedules based on our previous experience doing virtual only and what that transition is going to look like. So I feel like we are better prepared today to transition back to virtual if we need to quickly than we were a month ago, even just coming out of virtual all the way. So maintaining the status quo right now, even we put some pressure on ourselves and on our faculty to be ready to transition, and I think they are. But that said, I don't think that there's going to be, harm in having that plan ready and then saying, let's wait a little bit longer to see if we need to do it consistent with public health guidance. So, all right. So I'm going to move that we adjust our reopening and transition to virtual learning plan to realign with the current public health guidance. So I'm going to read something very similar sounding with some slight modifications. So Desert Marigold School will transition as quickly as feasible to virtual learning with on-site support services for eligible students using data from Arizona Department of Health Services for Maricopa County school benchmarks when all of the following factors are met for 2 consecutive weeks. 1, cases per 100,000 people remains above 100. 2%, positivity remains above 7%. Or 3, hospital visits for COVID-like illnesses remains above 10%. And Desert Marigold School will remain open or reopen using its current hybrid learning model as long as using data from Arizona Department of Health Services for Maricopa County school benchmarks. All of the following factors are met for 2 consecutive weeks. 1, cases per 100,000 people remains below 100. 2%, positivity remains below 7%. And 3, hospital visits for COVID-like illnesses remains below 10%. All right, so that was more than a mouthful. Any discussion?
I have some discussion on it, but is there somebody that is going to second that before we go to the discussion?
Thank you, Nathaniel.
I'll second the motion.
I just wanted to say, as far as discussion goes, I appreciate the specificity. Are we overcomplicating whether or not AZDHS, under that same set of constructs? Right now, they give us a hybrid recommendation versus giving us a virtual recommendation. Regardless of all of those specifics in our wording, is there, in this context, I don't know that it matters. We can vote on this particular motion, but just aligning with what their recommendation is, period. Because then if those metrics change and they adjust, but they still recommend hybrid. Anyway, it's just a thought, but
That's a fair point. Am I making it too complicated by throwing out all these benchmarks when we could just say we're going to follow the state guidance for Maricopa County on the recommended delivery model, whether that's hybrid or virtual only or fully in person? And
the only reason I say it is because it's like when we agreed to come back in person, it was based on a 7%. One of the metrics was based on 7%, and then they moved it after we made the decision to 10.
Right.
And then we were voting last week on sticking to our original, Anyway, it may be simpler, but I don't know that it matters for the sake of this vote at this stage with this motion on the floor.
No, I think it's a fair point. And frankly, it would be clearer administratively moving forward if we commit to just following the recommended delivery model on the DHS website for Maricopa County, because then it doesn't matter if they shift the guidelines as they learn more and as the public health guidance changes. It's just committed to following it. So I think that has a lot of appeal. Other thoughts? All right, we'll tell you what. I'm going to withdraw my motion, and I'm going to make a new motion. So I move that Desert Marigold School will follow the recommended delivery model as stated on the Arizona Department of Health Services website based on the data for Maricopa County. Any second?
That was so many words. I need to check to make sure that I got that right.
Mm-hmm.
We can everyone listen so we can second it if we need to, but I want to, or if you do have it written down, you could send it to me later. But
I don't. I made that one up.
Okay. Well, yeah. Then I do want to check it in the end.
Yep. Do you want to read it back to us what you had so we can all hear it again?
Yeah. Give me 1 second. I used some. What's the word? I guess shorthand or acronyms. I move that DMS will follow the recommended delivery model as stated on AZDHS website based on the data for Maricopa County.
Perfect. That's my memory of it. Okay. Any second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right then, all those in favor? Opposed? All right. Motion passes then. All right. So I believe that's all of our business this evening. This might set a record for the most efficient board meeting we've ever had. And I think April's fingers will thank us, even if she disagreed in our last motion. And I will send an email out to the community shortly after this meeting saying that we have realigned with the state recommended delivery model and spell out what that means. So, board members, I want to thank you for being available on short notice, taking this seriously, being very candid, and pushing us to be to have the highest level of integrity in a very difficult situation that we can have. I truly appreciate all of you, and I know that there's been times on this very issue where we have all disagreed. So thank you for continuing to come to the table and discuss in good faith. It's what we need. All right. Oh, you know what? I forgot to read the opening verse and the closing verse. But I will at this time move to adjourn.
Second.
I'll second that.
2 seconds.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. And all right. So I will read both the opening and closing verse for the sake of doing everything we said we were going to do on our agenda. Both of these are by Rudolf Steiner. The true aim of education is to awaken real powers of perception and judgment in relation to life and living, for only such an awakening can lead to true freedom. That's the first quote by Rudolf Steiner. And the closing verse: the most important task for humankind today and in the future is that we should learn to live together and understand one another. If this human fellowship is not achieved, all talk of development is empty. That again is Rudolf Steiner. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.